Mother Bear paced the hospital corridor, singing to a sick baby. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the pediatric ward of Cedar Grove Hospital as Nurse Mara Chen finished her midnight rounds. The hallways were quieter than usual, with only the soft hum of medical equipment and the occasional footstep breaking the silence. She paused outside room 314, where 3-year-old Luna Reeves lay sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The little girl had been fighting a rare respiratory condition for weeks now, and despite the doctor's best efforts, her condition remained critical. Mara adjusted Luna's blanket and checked the monitors one more time before stepping back into the corridor. As she walked toward the nurse's station, a strange sound made her freeze. It was low and rhythmic, almost like humming, but deeper than any human voice she'd ever heard. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, carrying through the sterile hallways like an ancient lullaby. "Did you hear that?" whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had just emerged from the elevator. Her dark eyes were wide with confusion as she looked around the empty corridor. Mara nodded, her heart beginning to race. "It's coming from down there." She pointed toward the far end of the hallway, where the sound seemed to grow stronger. Both women moved cautiously in that direction, their soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the polished floor. What they saw next would stay with them for the rest of their lives. A massive brown bear was pacing slowly back and forth in front of the large window that looked into the children's ward. Her thick fur caught the dim light from the emergency exit signs, and her enormous paws moved with surprising gentleness across the floor. But it wasn't just her presence that left them speechless. It was the sound coming from deep within her chest. The bear was singing. The melody was unlike anything either woman had ever heard. It rose and fell with an emotion so raw and pure that tears immediately sprang to Mara's eyes. The bear's massive head swayed gently as she continued her song, her dark eyes fixed on something beyond the glass. "How did she get in here?" Dr. Vasquez whispered, her medical training warring with the impossibility of what she was witnessing. Mara couldn't answer. She was too focused on where the bear's gaze was directed. Through the window, she could see directly into Luna's room, where the little girl had somehow turned in her sleep to face the corridor. Even from this distance, Mara could see that Luna's breathing seemed more peaceful than it had been in days. The bear continued her song, oblivious to their presence. Her voice carried notes of longing and love, of a mother's desperate hope. It was as if she was pouring her very soul into the melody, sending it through the glass to the sick child beyond. "We need to call security, Doctor," Vasquez said, but her voice lacked conviction. There was something sacred about this moment, something that made the idea of interrupting it feel like a violation. As if sensing their presence, the bear slowly turned her massive head toward them. Instead of the fierce predator they expected to see, her eyes held only gentleness and an intelligence that seemed almost human. She looked at them for a long moment, as if asking for their understanding, before turning back to continue her vigil. The song grew softer now, more intimate, as if the bear was sharing a secret with the sleeping child. Mara found herself stepping closer, drawn by something she couldn't explain. She had worked in this hospital for 15 years, had seen miracles and tragedies in equal measure, but nothing had prepared her for this. "Look at the monitors," Dr. Vasquez whispered urgently. Through the window, they could see Luna's vital signs displayed on the screen beside her bed. Her heart rate, which had been erratic for days, was now steady and strong. Her oxygen levels were improving with each passing minute. It was as if the bear's song was somehow healing the child from across the room. The bear seemed to sense the change as well. Her song became more hopeful, more joyful, and she pressed closer to the glass. Her breath fogged the window as she continued to sing, creating small circles of mist that caught the light like tiny rainbows. "This isn't possible, Doctor," Vasquez murmured, but even as she spoke, she was pulling out her phone to document what they were seeing. The readings on Luna's monitors were better than they had been since the child was admitted. Mara felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the bear's gentle devotion. There was something heartbreaking about the scene, something that spoke to every maternal instinct she possessed. The bear's song was filled with such love and desperation that it seemed to transcend the barriers between species. Suddenly, the bear stopped singing. She cocked her massive head to one side, as if listening to something only she could hear. Her ears twitched, and she let out a low whine that was filled with distress. She looked around frantically, her peaceful demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety. "What's happening?" Mara whispered. The bear padded to the far end of the corridor, sniffing the air and making soft huffing sounds. She seemed to be searching for something, her movements becoming more agitated with each passing second. The beautiful song had been replaced by sounds of worry and fear. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward carefully. "I think she's looking for something. Or someone." As if in response to her words, they heard it. A faint crying sound coming from somewhere deeper in the hospital. It wasn't human crying, but rather the distressed call of a young animal. The bear's head snapped up immediately, and she began moving toward the sound with purpose. "Follow her," Mara said without thinking. "Are you crazy?" Dr. Vasquez hissed, but she was already moving behind the bear, her curiosity overriding her caution. The bear led them down the corridor, past the sleeping patients and through the double doors that led to the service areas of the hospital. Her massive form moved with surprising grace through the narrow hallways, as if she knew exactly where she was going. The crying grew louder as they walked deeper into the hospital, and Mara realized with growing amazement that it sounded like a bear cub. The mother bear was practically running now, her desperation palpable as she followed the sound of her offspring's distress. They descended 2 flights of stairs, following the bear through areas of the hospital that Mara rarely visited. The maintenance corridors were dimly lit, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling, and the constant hum of machinery filling the air. The bear's claws clicked against the concrete floor as she moved with increasing urgency. "This is insane," Dr. Vasquez whispered, but she couldn't bring herself to turn back. The mother bear's obvious distress was heartbreaking to witness, and something about the whole situation felt too important to abandon. The crying sound was coming from behind a heavy metal door marked "Electrical Room, Authorized Personnel Only." The bear reached the door and began pawing at it frantically, her powerful claws scraping against the metal surface. She let out a series of low, mournful calls that seemed to answer the distressed cries from within. "How did a cub get in there?" Mara asked, pulling out her master keycard. Her hands were shaking as she approached the door, the mother bear stepping aside as if she understood that the humans could help. Dr. Vasquez grabbed Mara's arm. "Wait, we should call security first. If there's really a cub in there, we need to be careful. And we still don't know how any of this is possible." But the mother bear was becoming more agitated by the second. She pressed her massive body against the door and let out a sound that was part whine, part growl. The cries from inside the room grew more desperate, and Mara couldn't stand it anymore. "That baby is scared," she said firmly, swiping her card through the reader. "I'm not leaving it trapped in there." The door clicked open, and immediately the sounds from within became clearer. But as they stepped inside, flashlights from their phones illuminating the cramped space filled with electrical panels and humming machinery, what they found was not what they expected. Huddled in the corner, behind a large electrical transformer, was indeed a bear cub. But it wasn't alone. Pressed against its tiny body was a human child, maybe 4 years old, with tears streaming down his face. The boy had his arms wrapped around the cub, holding it close as both youngsters cried in fear. "Oh my God," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "Tommy Morrison." Mara's heart lurched. She recognized the name immediately. Tommy Morrison was the boy who had gone missing from the hospital 3 days ago. He had been visiting his grandmother in the cardiac unit when he somehow vanished without a trace. The entire hospital had been searched, security footage reviewed, and the police had been called. Everyone assumed he had somehow left the building. The mother bear pushed past them gently but firmly, rushing to her cub with a series of soft chuffs and grunts. The little bear responded immediately, scrambling out from behind the transformer and running to his mother. She began grooming him frantically, checking him for injuries while making soft, reassuring sounds. But Tommy remained in the corner, his eyes wide with fear as he looked at the adults. He was dirty and thin, obviously having been hiding in this room for days. His clothes were torn, and there were scratches on his arms, but he appeared to be unharmed. "Tommy, sweetie," Mara said softly, crouching down to his level. "We've been looking for you everywhere. Your parents are so worried." The boy shook his head vigorously. "I can't leave Bear," he whispered, his voice hoarse from crying. "He's scared. His mama was looking for him, and I was keeping him safe." The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place for Mara. Somehow, Tommy had found the lost cub and had been hiding with it, trying to protect it. But how had the mother bear gotten into the hospital? And how had she known where to find her offspring? Dr. Vasquez was already on her phone, calling security and the police to report that Tommy had been found. But as she spoke, she kept glancing at the mother bear, who was now sitting calmly with her cub, watching the humans with intelligent eyes. "Tommy," Mara said gently, "can you tell us what happened? How did you find the baby bear?" The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "I was visiting Grandma Betty, and I heard crying from the stairs. I went to look, and he was stuck behind some boxes in the storage room upstairs. He was so little and scared. I tried to take him outside, but then all the people came looking for me, so I hid with him down here." "You've been here for 3 days?" Dr. Vasquez asked, amazed. "What did you eat?" Tommy pointed to a small pile of vending machine snacks in the corner. "I had money from Mom, and I found the machines upstairs. I shared everything with Bear, but he wouldn't eat much. He kept crying for his mama." The mother bear seemed to understand their conversation. She approached Tommy slowly, her massive head lowered in a non-threatening manner. The boy looked terrified, but he didn't run. Instead, he reached out tentatively and touched her nose. "I kept him safe," Tommy whispered to the mother bear. "I promised him his mama would come." What happened next brought tears to everyone's eyes. The mother bear gently nuzzled Tommy's face, making soft sounds that seemed like gratitude. She then carefully picked up her cub by the scruff of his neck and placed him in Tommy's lap, as if asking the boy to continue caring for her baby just a little longer. "She trusts you," Mara said in wonder. "She knows you protected her cub." But even as they watched this incredible interaction, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. How had a wild bear gotten into the hospital undetected? The building was secure, with card access doors and security cameras everywhere. And why had she gone straight to the pediatric ward, to Luna's room specifically? "Dr. Vasquez," she said quietly, "we need to check on Luna. There was something about the way the bear was singing to her." The doctor nodded, understanding immediately. You think there's a connection. Before Mara could answer, they heard footsteps echoing down the corridor. Security guards were approaching, along with what sounded like paramedics and police officers. The mother bear's ears perked up, and she began to look anxious again. "It's okay," Tommy said to her, somehow sensing her distress. "They're here to help." But as the footsteps grew closer, something unexpected happened. The lights in the electrical room began to flicker, and they heard a commotion from somewhere far above them in the hospital. Shouts and running footsteps echoed through the building, and Dr. Vasquez's phone began buzzing with urgent messages. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. "There's an emergency in the pediatric ward. Multiple patients are showing sudden changes in their vital signs." Mara's heart sank. "Luna? All of them," Dr. Vasquez said grimly. "Every child in the ward. Their conditions are deteriorating rapidly." The mother bear seemed to sense something was wrong. She stood up abruptly, her cub still in Tommy's arms, and began pacing back and forth. Her agitation was growing by the second, and she kept looking toward the ceiling as if she could see through the floors to the children above. "We need to get back up there," Dr. Vasquez said urgently. "Now." But as they prepared to leave, Tommy spoke up again, his voice barely a whisper. "There's something else. Something I didn't tell you." Everyone turned to look at the little boy, who was still holding the bear cub close to his chest. His eyes were filled with a wisdom that seemed far beyond his 4 years. "Bear's mama. She's not just any bear, she's special. She was trying to tell me something these past few days, but I couldn't understand. But I think she knows about the sick children upstairs. That's why she came here." The mother bear looked directly at Tommy as he spoke, and for a moment it seemed as if she was nodding in agreement. Then she let out a long, low call that echoed through the corridors of the hospital, a sound that was both mournful and urgent. As if in response to her call, they heard something that made everyone's blood run cold. From somewhere far above them, carried through the ventilation system, came the sound of children crying. Not the normal crying of sick children, but something deeper, more desperate. The sound of young lives slipping away. "We have to go, Doctor," Vasquez said, but her voice was shaking. "Right now." The mother bear was already moving toward the door, her cub forgotten in Tommy's arms as she focused on something only she could sense. But as they reached the corridor, she stopped suddenly and turned back to the little boy. She approached him one more time, this time pressing her massive forehead against his chest, where he held her cub. The gesture was so tender, so full of meaning, that even the approaching security guards stopped in their tracks. "She's asking me to bring him," Tommy said with certainty. "She needs both of us upstairs. Something terrible is happening to the children, and she knows how to stop it." The sounds from above grew more urgent, and Mara made a decision that would change everything. Instead of waiting for the authorities to sort out the situation, she scooped Tommy and the cub into her arms and began running toward the stairs, following the mother bear as she raced through the hospital corridors. Behind them, they could hear Dr. Vasquez explaining the situation to the security team, her voice fading as they climbed higher into the building. But ahead of them, the mother bear moved with purpose, as if she knew exactly what needed to be done. What they would find when they reached the pediatric ward would challenge everything they thought they knew about the connection between humans and the natural world, and it would reveal a truth about the mother bear that none of them could have imagined. As they climbed the stairs, the mother bear suddenly stopped on the second-floor landing. She turned to face them, her eyes filled with an urgency that made Mara's heart race. The bear let out a series of soft grunts and whines, almost as if she was trying to communicate something specific. "What is it, girl?" Mara whispered, still holding Tommy and the cub. The little boy looked up at her with those wise eyes of his. "She wants us to wait," Tommy said quietly. "She's telling us something important is about to happen." Before anyone could question how a 4-year-old could possibly understand a bear's communication, the building's emergency lighting system kicked in. The regular fluorescent lights dimmed, replaced by the eerie red glow of emergency power. An announcement crackled over the hospital's PA system. "Code Blue, Pediatric Ward. Code Blue, Pediatric Ward. All available medical personnel report immediately." Dr. Vasquez's voice echoed from below as she ran up the stairs behind them. "The elevators are down. The whole building's electrical system is going crazy." But the mother bear didn't seem surprised by any of this. Instead, she began climbing the stairs again, this time moving more slowly, more deliberately. With each step, she let out a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to resonate through the building itself. "She's singing again," Tommy said wonderingly. "But this time it's different. It's bigger." Mara could feel it too. The bear's song wasn't just a melody anymore. It was something that seemed to vibrate through the walls, through the very foundation of the hospital. Other sounds began to join in. The hum of medical equipment, the whisper of air through the ventilation system, even the distant sound of traffic outside. Everything was harmonizing with the mother bear's voice. When they reached the 3rd floor, they found chaos. Medical staff were rushing between rooms, their faces etched with panic and confusion. The sound of alarms was constant, and through the doorways they could see children in various states of distress. But what struck Mara most was the silence that fell over the ward the moment the mother bear appeared. Every person, every machine, every sound seemed to pause as the massive creature padded down the corridor. The emergency lights flickered and steadied, and for a moment there was perfect quiet. "My God," breathed Dr. Patricia Hoffman, the head of pediatric medicine, as she emerged from one of the rooms. "How did that animal get in here? And why do I feel like everything just became calm?" The mother bear walked directly to Luna's room, the same room where she had been singing hours earlier. But now, instead of standing outside the glass, she gently pushed the door open with her massive paw and entered. "We should stop her," Dr. Hoffman said, but her voice lacked conviction. There was something about the bear's presence that felt protective rather than threatening. Tommy wriggled in Mara's arms. "Put me down. She needs us to come with her." Against every protocol and safety regulation she had ever learned, Mara set Tommy down. The little boy immediately walked into Luna's room, still carrying the bear cub. The mother bear looked at him with what could only be described as approval. Luna was awake now, her eyes wide with wonder rather than fear, as she looked at the enormous bear standing beside her bed. Her breathing, which had been labored for weeks, seemed easier somehow. The monitors that had been screaming alarms just minutes ago were now showing stable, even improved vital signs. "Mama Bear," Luna whispered, her voice weak but clear. "I dreamed about you. You were singing to me." The mother bear leaned down and gently nuzzled the little girl's face, making soft, comforting sounds. Then she turned to Tommy, who was still holding her cub. "She wants me to put the baby bear on Luna's bed," Tommy said with certainty. "He's supposed to be here too." Dr. Hoffman stepped forward. "Now, wait a minute. We can't have wild animals in direct contact with our patients. The risk of infection, disease transmission." But her words trailed off as she watched what happened next. Tommy carefully placed the bear cub on Luna's bed, and the tiny creature immediately snuggled against the little girl's side. Luna's face lit up with the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her in weeks. The moment the cub touched Luna, something extraordinary happened. The monitoring equipment in her room began to show readings that were better than anything the doctors had recorded since her admission. Her oxygen saturation levels rose, her heart rate stabilized, and her temperature normalized. "This is impossible, doctor," Hoffman murmured, staring at the monitors. "Her white blood cell count is actually improving. In real time." But the miracle wasn't limited to Luna's room. Throughout the pediatric ward, similar scenes were playing out. Children who had been critical just minutes before were showing signs of recovery. Parents who had been holding vigil beside their sick children were crying tears of joy as they watched their little ones' conditions improve. "It's happening everywhere," Dr. Vasquez reported as she moved from room to room. "Every child in the ward is getting better. It's like something is healing them all at once." Mara watched in amazement as the mother bear moved through the ward, visiting each room briefly. In every case, her presence seemed to bring peace and healing. Children who had been crying in pain fell into restful sleep. Machines that had been sounding alarms grew quiet. "How is this possible?" she asked Tommy, who seemed to be the only one who truly understood what was happening. The little boy looked up at her with those ancient eyes. "She's not just a bear, Miss Mara. She's something else. Something that helps sick children get better." "But how do you know that?" Tommy was quiet for a long moment, watching as the mother bear returned to Luna's room. "Because I was sick too, before I found her baby. Really sick. The doctors said I might have to stay in the hospital for a long time. But when I was taking care of the little bear, I started feeling better, and when his mama came to find us, I knew she was the one who was helping me." Mara's mind reeled. She looked at Tommy more carefully now, noting the healthy color in his cheeks, the brightness in his eyes. When she had first seen him in the electrical room, she had attributed his appearance to 3 days of hiding and fear. But now she realized that he looked remarkably well for a child who had supposedly been critically ill. "Tommy," she said carefully, "what exactly was wrong with you when you came to visit your grandmother?" The boy's face grew sad. "I had the same thing as Luna. The doctors said my lungs weren't working right and I might need a special machine to help me breathe. But Grandma Betty said I should be brave, so I was trying to be brave for her." A chill ran down Mara's spine. She looked at Luna, peacefully sleeping with the bear cub curled against her side, and then at Tommy, who was clearly breathing normally and showing no signs of respiratory distress. "Dr. Vasquez," she called urgently. "I need you to run some tests on Tommy, now." While Dr. Vasquez began examining Tommy, Mara turned her attention back to the mother bear. The massive creature was now sitting quietly beside Luna's bed, her presence somehow filling the room with a sense of peace and protection. "What are you?" Mara whispered to the bear. As if in response to her question, something unexpected happened. The lights in the room began to dim, but instead of the harsh emergency lighting, a soft golden glow seemed to emanate from the mother bear herself. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it grew stronger as they watched. "Everyone needs to see this," Dr. Hoffman said, her voice filled with awe. She began calling other staff members, and soon the doorway to Luna's room was filled with medical personnel, all staring in amazement at the glowing bear. But the most remarkable thing was happening to the children throughout the ward. As the golden light grew stronger, their recovery accelerated. Children who had been bedridden for months were sitting up in their beds. Parents were sobbing with joy as they watched their little ones show signs of returning strength. "The test results are in, Doctor," Vasquez announced, her voice shaking with emotion. "Tommy's lungs are completely clear. No sign of the respiratory condition that brought him here. It's as if he was never sick at all." Tommy looked up at the mother bear with deep gratitude. "Thank you for making me better. And thank you for helping all the other kids, too." The bear leaned down and gently touched Tommy's forehead with her nose, a gesture that seemed almost like a blessing. Then she turned to her cub, who was still curled up against Luna's side. What happened next would be talked about in the hospital for years to come. The mother bear began to sing again, but this time her voice was joined by others. The bear cub added his small voice to the melody, and then, incredibly, Luna began to hum along. Soon, other children throughout the ward were joining in, their young voices creating a harmony that seemed to fill the entire building. The song was unlike anything any of them had ever heard. It spoke of healing and hope, of the deep connection between all living things. It was a lullaby that transcended species, a melody that seemed to come from the very heart of nature itself. As the song continued, the golden light around the mother bear grew brighter, and something extraordinary began to happen. The light seemed to spread outward, touching every person in the room, every child in the ward, and wherever it touched, healing followed. But even as they witnessed this miracle, Mara noticed something troubling. The mother bear was growing fainter, more translucent. The effort of healing so many children at once seemed to be draining her very essence. "She's fading," Mara said urgently. "The healing is taking something from her." Tommy noticed it too. He rushed to the mother bear's side, pressing his small hands against her massive paw. "Don't go," he whispered. "We need you." The bear looked down at him with infinite tenderness, but her eyes were growing dim. She was sacrificing herself to save the children, pouring her very life force into their healing. "There has to be another way, Doctor," Vasquez said desperately. "There has to be something we can do." But even as she spoke, they heard a sound that made everyone's heart skip a beat. From somewhere outside the hospital, carried on the night wind, came the sound of other bears singing. The mother bear's song was being answered by voices from the forest, voices that seemed to be offering their strength to help her complete her work. The golden light flickered and steadied, and the mother bear's form became solid again. She was not alone in her healing mission. The entire bear community was somehow supporting her efforts, lending their power to save the human children. As the night wore on, the impossible became reality. Every child in the pediatric ward was not just stable, but actively healing. Diseases that had baffled doctors for months were disappearing. Conditions that had been deemed incurable were reversing themselves. But the story was far from over. As dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of a new day, Mara realized that the mother bear's presence in the hospital was about to attract attention from the outside world. News crews would arrive, scientists would want to study the phenomenon, and government officials would want to capture and contain the bears. "We need to protect them," she said to Dr. Vasquez. "Whatever they are, wherever they came from, they can't become subjects for experimentation." Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. "But how do we keep this quiet? Half the hospital staff witnessed what happened here tonight." As if sensing their concern, the mother bear stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the forest beyond the hospital grounds, where the first rays of sunlight were beginning to filter through the trees. Then she turned back to the humans, her intelligent eyes seeming to convey a message of farewell. "She's leaving," Tommy said sadly. "She has to go back to the forest now." But Luna, who had been quietly watching everything, suddenly spoke up. "Wait," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I know where she comes from. I saw it in my dreams when she was singing to me." Everyone turned to look at the little girl, who was sitting up in her bed with the bear cub still curled against her side. "She comes from the old forest, the one that used to be here before the hospital was built," She's been watching over this place for a very long time, waiting for children who needed her help. The mother bear nodded slowly, as if confirming Luna's words. Then she gently picked up her cub, who protested softly at being separated from his new human friend. "Will we see you again?" Tommy asked, his eyes bright with tears. The mother bear paused at the doorway, looking back at all the children she had healed. Then she let out a soft, melodic call that seemed to say, "Yes," in a language that transcended words. As she walked down the corridor, her massive form moving with grace and dignity, every person she passed felt a sense of profound gratitude. She had given them a gift that could never be repaid, the gift of life itself. But as she disappeared around the corner, heading toward the exit, Mara realized that their story was far from over. The mother bear's healing had saved the children, but it had also raised questions that would change everything they thought they knew about the natural world and humanity's place in it. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the hospital windows, Mara followed the mother bear at a respectful distance. She needed to understand more about this extraordinary creature before she vanished back into the forest forever. The bear moved with purpose through the corridors, but something was different now. Her steps seemed heavier, and occasionally she would pause to rest against the wall. "The healing took more out of her than we realized," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, joining Mara in the hallway. "Look at her movements. She's exhausted." They watched as the mother bear reached the main entrance of the hospital. But instead of leaving immediately, she turned and looked back down the long corridor, as if memorizing every detail of the place where she had performed her miracle. Tommy appeared beside them, having slipped away from the nurses who were trying to process his remarkable recovery. "She's not ready to go yet," he said, with that uncanny understanding he seemed to have developed. "There's something else she needs to do first." As if responding to his words, the mother bear began walking toward a different part of the hospital, the cardiac wing where Tommy's grandmother was staying. The little boy's face lit up with understanding. "Grandma Betty!" he exclaimed. "She wants to see Grandma Betty." They followed the bear through the cardiac unit, where early morning staff were just beginning their shifts. The few nurses and doctors they encountered stopped in their tracks, unable to process what they were seeing. Word of the pediatric ward miracle had spread quickly through the hospital, but seeing the actual bear walking calmly through the halls was still beyond comprehension. The mother bear stopped outside room 418, where an elderly woman lay sleeping peacefully. Through the window, they could see that this was clearly Tommy's grandmother. She had the same wise eyes and gentle expression, even in sleep. "She's been so worried about me," Tommy whispered. "When I went missing, the doctors said it made her heart condition worse." The bear gently pushed open the door and entered the room. Betty Morrison stirred as the massive creature approached her bed, but instead of fear, her eyes filled with wonder and recognition. "You're the one," she said softly, her voice weak but clear. "You're the one from my dreams. I've been dreaming about a bear who would save my Tommy." The mother bear leaned down and very gently nuzzled the elderly woman's hand. As she did, something remarkable happened. The heart monitor beside Betty's bed, which had been showing irregular rhythms for days, suddenly steadied into a strong, healthy pattern. "My chest," Betty said in amazement, sitting up straighter than she had in weeks. "The pain is gone. I can breathe again." Dr. Vasquez checked the monitors with growing excitement. "Her readings are completely normal. Better than normal, actually. This is unprecedented." But as they watched this touching reunion between Tommy and his grandmother, something unexpected happened. The mother bear suddenly stiffened, her ears perking up as if she had heard something alarming. She looked toward the window, and they could all see vehicles pulling into the hospital parking lot. News vans, Mara said grimly. Someone called the media. Through the window, they could see reporters setting up cameras and satellite equipment. Word of the miracle healing had somehow leaked out, and the outside world was coming to investigate. The mother bear seemed to understand the danger immediately. She looked at Tommy and his grandmother with what could only be described as urgency, then moved toward the window. But as she did, something even more surprising happened. "Wait," said a voice from the doorway. They turned to see Luna standing there, somehow having walked from the pediatric ward despite being bedridden for weeks. She was holding the bear cub in her arms, and both child and animal looked distressed. "The baby bear told me something," Luna said, her voice still weak but determined. "He said there are more children who need help. Not in the hospital, but out there in the world. His mama can't stay here anymore because the bad people will try to catch her, but there are other sick children who need her." The mother bear approached Luna and gently took her cub, but she also leaned down to listen as the little girl continued speaking. "He showed me pictures in my mind," Luna said wonderingly. "There's a little girl in the mountains who can't walk, and a boy by the ocean who can't hear, and so many others. They're all waiting for her to come help them." Tommy's grandmother, Betty, suddenly sat up straighter in her bed. "I know about the children," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I've been having dreams about them for months. Children all over the world who need healing that regular medicine can't provide." Mara felt a chill run down her spine. "Mrs. Morrison, what exactly have you been dreaming?" The elderly woman's eyes took on a distant look. "I see them every night when I sleep. Hundreds of children, all calling out for help. And I see her," she gestured toward the mother bear, traveling from place to place, healing them one by one. But she can't do it alone anymore. The sickness in the world is getting stronger and she's getting weaker. The bear cub in the mother's arms began making soft whimpering sounds, and Luna translated with that strange understanding that seemed to come naturally to the children. "He says the healing light is fading from the earth," Luna said, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "His mama has been working alone for so long, trying to help all the sick children, but there are too many now. She needs help." Dr. Vasquez, who had been quietly observing everything, suddenly spoke up. "What if we could help? What if there was a way to amplify her healing power without exhausting her?" The mother bear turned to look at her with interest, as if she understood exactly what the doctor was suggesting. "I've been thinking about the golden light," Dr. Vasquez continued, "the way it spread throughout the hospital. What if that energy could be captured somehow, or channeled through other means?" Tommy, who had been quietly holding his grandmother's hand, suddenly looked up with excitement. "The singing! It's all about the singing." When everyone sang together, the healing got stronger. Betty Morrison nodded slowly. "In my dreams, I always hear singing. Not just the bear's voice, but human voices too. Children singing, adults singing, all joining together to make the healing stronger." The mother bear began to make soft, rhythmic sounds, and the cub in her arms responded with his own tiny voice. Luna immediately began humming along, and soon Tommy joined in. Even Betty, despite her recent illness, added her trembling voice to the melody. As their voices blended together, something extraordinary happened. The golden light that had surrounded the mother bear earlier began to reappear, but this time it wasn't draining her energy. Instead, it seemed to be drawing power from all of them, growing stronger with each voice that joined the song. "It's working, Doctor," Vasquez said in amazement. "The healing energy is being shared among all of you. She doesn't have to carry the burden alone anymore." But their moment of discovery was interrupted by urgent knocking on the door. Security guards were outside, along with what appeared to be government officials in dark suits. "We need to take the animals into custody for public safety," one of the officials announced. "This situation has gotten out of hand." The mother bear immediately positioned herself protectively in front of the children and Betty, her earlier gentleness replaced by fierce maternal instinct. The cub pressed closer to his mother, sensing the danger. "You can't take them," Tommy said bravely, stepping between the officials and the bears. "They're not just animals, they're healers. They help sick children get better." "Son, we understand you've been through a traumatic experience," one of the officials said in a condescending tone. "But these are wild animals and they pose a significant risk to public safety. The only risk here is losing the most important medical breakthrough in human history," Dr. Vasquez said firmly. "These bears have demonstrated healing abilities that could revolutionize medicine. Taking them into custody would be a catastrophic mistake." Betty Morrison struggled to sit up in her bed, her newly healed heart giving her strength she hadn't felt in years. "Young man," she said to the lead official, "I've lived for 87 years, and I've never seen anything more beautiful or important than what happened here tonight. If you take these bears away from the children who need them, you'll be responsible for condemning countless sick children to suffering." The official was about to respond when something unexpected happened. The sound of singing began to drift through the hospital corridors. It started with just a few voices, parents of the healed children in the pediatric ward, but it quickly spread as nurses, doctors, and other staff members joined in. The song was the same melody the mother bear had been singing, the one that had somehow embedded itself in the hearts of everyone who had heard it. As more voices joined the chorus, the golden light around the bears grew brighter and more stable. "This is impossible," one of the officials muttered, staring at the glowing bears with a mixture of fear and awe. But Luna stepped forward, still weak from her illness but filled with determination. "It's not impossible. It's what's supposed to happen. The bears aren't meant to be alone anymore. They're supposed to work with us, to teach us how to heal like they do." The mother bear looked at Luna with profound gratitude, then did something that stunned everyone present. She began to walk toward the official who had spoken about taking her into custody. But instead of aggression, her approach was gentle, almost humble. When she reached him, she sat down and looked directly into his eyes. For a long moment, human and bear regarded each other in silence. Then the official's expression began to change. The hard lines of authority softened, replaced by something like wonder. I can hear her," he said in amazement. "She's not just an animal. She's trying to communicate with me." The mother bear placed one massive paw very gently on the man's hand, and suddenly his eyes filled with tears. "She's showing me the children," he whispered. "All the sick children around the world. I can see them, feel their pain, and I can see how she's been trying to help them, traveling from place to place, healing them one by one." The other officials looked on in shock as their colleague was transformed by the bear's touch. When she finally released him, he turned to his team with a completely different demeanor. "We're not taking them anywhere," he said firmly. "Whatever they are, whatever this is, we need to protect it, not control it." But even as this crisis was resolved, a new challenge emerged. The sound of helicopters could be heard overhead, and through the windows they could see that the hospital was now surrounded by media, government vehicles, and crowds of curious onlookers. "We can't keep this secret anymore," Mara said grimly. "The whole world is going to know about the bears within hours." The mother bear seemed to understand the implications. She gathered her cub close and looked around the room at all the humans who had become part of her extended family. Then she began to sing again, but this time her song was different. It was a song of farewell, but also of hope. "She's not leaving forever," Tommy said, interpreting the bear's message. She's going to find the other children who need help, but she'll come back. And she wants us to keep singing while she's gone, to keep the healing energy strong." Luna nodded in agreement. "The baby bear wants to stay with us for a while, to help us learn how to heal like they do. His mama says he can teach us." The mother bear nuzzled her cub one final time, then approached each of the humans in turn. To Betty, she gave a gentle touch that seemed to seal the elderly woman's healing. To Dr. Vasquez, she offered a look of partnership, as if recognizing her as a fellow healer. To Mara, she gave a nudge of gratitude for her protection and understanding. Finally, she came to Tommy and Luna, the two children who had been most deeply touched by her gift. She touched each of their foreheads with her nose, and for a moment, they all glowed with the same golden light. "She's giving us part of her power," Luna whispered in awe, "so we can help other children even when she's not here." As the mother bear moved toward the window, preparing to leave and face whatever awaited her in the outside world, Tommy called out one last question. "Will you be safe out there? With all those people wanting to catch you?" The mother bear paused and looked back at him with what could only be described as a smile. Then she let out a soft call that was answered immediately by voices from the forest. Dozens of other bears, all singing in harmony. "She's not alone," Luna said with wonder. "There are others like her. They've been waiting for her to teach them how to help humans too." As the mother bear prepared to rejoin her community in the forest, beginning a new chapter in the ancient relationship between humans and the natural world, everyone in that hospital room knew they had witnessed something that would change everything. The age of bears and humans working together to heal the world was about to begin. But as the mother bear reached the window, preparing to make her exit, something unexpected happened that would complicate everything. The bear cub in Luna's arms suddenly began crying out in distress, not the soft whimpers they had heard before, but urgent, almost panicked sounds that made everyone's heart race. The mother bear immediately turned back. Her ears flattened against her head in alarm. She rushed to her cub, sniffing him carefully and making concerned vocalizations. The little bear continued his distressed calls, and Luna's face went pale as she held him. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "He's trying to tell us something terrible is about to happen." Tommy moved closer, placing his small hand on the cub's fur. His eyes widened with fear as he somehow connected with the young bear's message. "There's another child," Tommy said urgently. "Somewhere in the hospital, someone we missed. And they're dying right now." Dr. Vasquez immediately pulled out her phone to call the nurses' station, but the cub's cries grew even more frantic. The mother bear began pacing in tight circles, her anxiety palpable. "It's not a patient," Luna said, her voice barely above a whisper, as she interpreted the cub's increasingly desperate communications. "It's someone who works here, someone who's been hiding how sick they are." Betty Morrison struggled to sit up straighter in her bed, her newly healed heart giving her strength but also clarity that was almost frightening. "I know who it is," she said quietly. "I've been having dreams about her for weeks. A young woman with dark hair who takes care of children but won't let anyone take care of her." Mara's blood ran cold. She knew exactly who Betty was describing. Sarah Chen, the night shift pediatric nurse. She's been working double shifts for months, covering for other staff. She always said she was fine, but where is she now? Dr. Vasquez asked urgently. The mother bear was already moving toward the door, following some instinct or scent that the humans couldn't detect. The cub continued his distressed calls, which seemed to be guiding his mother through the hospital corridors. They followed the bears through a maze of hallways, past the bustling areas where news crews were trying to gain access, through service corridors that few people ever used. The mother bear moved with increasing urgency, occasionally stopping to sniff the air before changing direction. Finally, they reached a small break room on the 4th floor that Mara had never even noticed before. The door was locked, but the mother bear pressed her massive body against it and whined softly. "Sarah," Mara called through the door. "Sarah, are you in there?" There was no response, but they could hear the faint sound of labored breathing from inside. Dr. Vasquez used her master key to unlock the door, and what they found inside made everyone gasp. Sarah Chen was collapsed on the floor beside a small cot, her face deathly pale, and her breathing shallow and irregular. She was wearing her nurse's uniform, but it was clear that she had been secretly using this hidden room to rest between shifts, probably for weeks or even months. "She's been hiding her symptoms," Dr. Vasquez said, immediately kneeling beside the young woman to check her pulse. "Her breathing is severely compromised. How did we not notice?" Tommy, still carrying the bear cub, answered sadly. "She was using all her energy to take care of other people. The baby bear says she's been getting sicker and sicker, but she kept pretending to be okay because she didn't want to leave the children without a nurse." The mother bear approached Sarah's unconscious form and very gently nuzzled her face. The golden healing light began to emanate from the bear again, but this time something was different. The light flickered and wavered, as if the bear was struggling to maintain it. "She's too weak," Luna said with alarm. "All the healing she did tonight used up too much of her strength. She doesn't have enough power left to save Sarah." The bear cub in Luna's arms began making soft, encouraging sounds toward his mother, as if trying to give her strength. But it was clear that the massive healing effort in the pediatric ward had taken a tremendous toll on the mother bear. "The singing," Betty Morrison said suddenly, from where she was leaning against the door frame, having insisted on following them despite her recent illness. "Remember what we learned. The healing is stronger when we all work together." Without hesitation, Tommy began humming the bear's melody. Luna joined in immediately, her young voice blending perfectly with his. Betty added her trembling but determined voice, and soon Mara and Dr. Vasquez were singing as well. As their voices combined, the mother bear's golden light grew steadier and brighter. The healing energy that had been flickering began to flow more strongly toward Sarah's unconscious form, but even with their combined efforts, something wasn't working. Sarah's breathing remained labored, and her color wasn't improving. "It's not enough, Doctor," Vasquez said desperately. "Whatever's wrong with her, it's too advanced. We need more power, more voices." The bear cub suddenly wriggled out of Luna's arms and scrambled over to his mother. He pressed himself against her side and began making a series of urgent vocalizations that seemed almost like a conversation. "He's telling her about something," Tommy said, watching the interaction between mother and cub with intense concentration. "Something about other helpers? Other bears who can help?" The mother bear lifted her massive head and let out a long, haunting call that echoed through the hospital corridors. It was answered immediately by voices from outside. Not just one or two bears, but what sounded like dozens of them, all responding to her desperate plea for help. "They're coming," Luna said with wonder. "All the bears from the forest. They're coming to help save Sarah." Through the windows of the break room, they could see an extraordinary sight. Bears of all sizes were emerging from the forest that bordered the hospital grounds. They moved with purpose toward the building, their voices joining together in a chorus of healing that was unlike anything any of them had ever heard. But as the bears approached the hospital, a new crisis emerged. The news crews and government officials outside were thrown into panic at the sight of dozens of wild bears converging on the building. Shouts of alarm could be heard, along with the sound of vehicles starting and people running. "They're going to try to stop them," Mara said grimly. "They don't understand that the bears are here to help." The mother bear seemed to sense the danger to her community. She looked torn between her need to save Sarah and her responsibility to protect the other bears from human interference. "We have to do something," Tommy said urgently. "Sarah is going to die if the bears can't get to her, but the people outside are going to hurt the bears if they try to come in." Betty Morrison, despite her age and recent illness, suddenly straightened up with a determination that surprised everyone. "I know what to do," she said firmly. "I need to get to the main entrance now." "Mrs. Morrison, you can't possibly—" Dr. Vasquez began. "I've been having dreams about this moment for months," Betty interrupted. "I know what I need to do. The bears aren't just here for Sarah. They're here because it's time for the world to know the truth about the healing." As if understanding Betty's words, the mother bear gently picked up her cub and placed him back in Luna's arms. Then she moved to Betty's side, offering her massive shoulder for support. "She wants to help me walk," Betty said with amazement. "She knows I need to get outside to talk to the people." The unlikely pair, an elderly woman and a massive bear, began making their way toward the hospital's main entrance, while Tommy, Luna, Mara, and Dr. Vasquez stayed with the unconscious Sarah. As they waited anxiously, they could hear Betty's voice over the hospital's PA system, which someone must have given her access to. "Attention, everyone," Betty's voice rang out clearly through the building. "My name is Betty Morrison, and I'm speaking to you from the main entrance of Cedar Grove Hospital. I know you're all frightened by the sight of so many bears, but I'm here to tell you that they're not here to hurt anyone. They're here to save lives." Through the windows, they could see that the chaos outside was beginning to quiet as people listened to the elderly woman's words. "Tonight, my grandson and many other children were healed by these remarkable creatures," Betty continued. "But there's still one more person who needs their help. A young nurse named Sarah Chen, who has spent her life caring for others and is now dying because she wouldn't take care of herself." The mother bear at Betty's side let out a soft, melodic call that was picked up by all the other bears surrounding the hospital. The sound was so beautiful and peaceful that even the most frightened observers began to calm down. "These bears are asking for your help," Betty said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "They need all of us to sing together, to lend our voices to their healing song. Only together can we save Sarah, and only together can we begin to heal all the sick children in the world who are waiting for our help." Back in the break room, Sarah's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Her breathing had become so shallow that Dr. Vasquez was preparing to perform emergency CPR. "The singing isn't enough without the other bears," Tommy said desperately, "but they can't get inside with all those people blocking them." Luna, who had been quietly holding the bear cub, suddenly looked up with tears in her eyes. "The baby bear says there's one more thing we can try, but it's very dangerous." "What?" Mara asked urgently. "He says he can share his mother's healing power with us directly, but it might hurt him. Baby bears aren't supposed to use that much energy." The bear cub looked up at Luna with eyes that seemed far too wise for such a young creature. He made a series of soft sounds that were clearly his decision to try, despite the risk. "He wants to do it," Luna said, her voice breaking. "He says Sarah reminds him of his mother, always taking care of others and never thinking about herself." Before anyone could stop him, the bear cub climbed out of Luna's arms and made his way to Sarah's side. He placed his tiny paws on her chest and began to glow with the same golden light as his mother, but the effort was clearly overwhelming for his small body. Tommy immediately knelt beside the cub, placing his hands over the small bear's paws. "I can help," he said. "I still have some of the healing energy his mama gave me." Luna joined them. and soon all the humans in the room were connected in a chain of healing energy that flowed from the brave little cub through each of them and into Sarah's failing body. The strain on the bear cub was enormous. He began to tremble with the effort, his small body shaking as he poured his life force into saving the young nurse. But just when it seemed like he might collapse from the effort, something miraculous happened. The sound of singing began to drift through the hospital from outside. It started with Betty's voice over the PA system, but quickly grew as hundreds of people, news crews, government officials, hospital staff, and curious onlookers, all began to join in the bears' healing song. The combined voices of humans and bears created a harmony that was felt throughout the entire building. The golden healing light around the bear cub grew stronger and more stable, supported by the collective will of everyone who was singing. Sarah's breathing suddenly deepened and steadied. Color began to return to her cheeks, and her pulse grew stronger. The young nurse's eyes fluttered open, and she looked around in confusion at the extraordinary scene surrounding her. What happened?" she whispered weakly. "You almost died because you were too stubborn to admit you were sick," Dr. Vasquez said with a mixture of relief and exasperation. "But these bears and these children saved your life." Sarah tried to sit up and noticed the tiny bear cub lying exhausted beside her. Without hesitation, she gathered the small creature into her arms, her nursing instincts taking over even in her weakened state. "He's so tired," she said softly. "He used all his energy to help me, didn't he?" The bear cub opened his eyes and looked up at Sarah with obvious affection. He made a small, contented sound and snuggled closer to her, as if he had found exactly where he belonged. Outside, the singing continued, but now it was a song of celebration rather than desperate healing. The barriers between humans and bears had been broken down, and something new and wonderful was beginning. But even as they celebrated Sarah's recovery, Mara realized that this was just the beginning. Word of the healing bears would spread around the world within hours. Scientists would want to study them, governments would want to control them, and sick children everywhere would be hoping for their own miracle. "What happens now?" she asked, looking around at the exhausted but triumphant group. Betty Morrison's voice came over the PA system one more time, as if she had heard Mara's question. "Now we begin the real work," she said. "Now we learn how to heal together, humans and bears, and we carry that healing to every corner of the world where it's needed." The mother bear, who had been outside with Betty, suddenly appeared in the doorway of the break room. She looked at her cub sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms, and her eyes filled with what could only be described as pride and love. She approached Sarah slowly, gently nuzzling the young woman who had nearly died in service to others. Then she looked around at all the humans who had helped save both Sarah and her cub, and let out a soft, rumbling sound that seemed to say, "Thank you," in a language that transcended species. But as the golden light of healing continued to glow softly around all of them, Mara noticed something that made her heart race with new concern. In the distance, she could hear the sound of helicopters approaching. Not news helicopters this time, but military aircraft. The government officials who had been converted by the mother bear's touch were no longer in charge. Someone higher up the chain of command had decided that the situation needed to be contained, by force if necessary. The age of cooperation between humans and bears had begun, but it was already under threat from those who feared what they couldn't understand or control. As the military helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the early morning darkness, the mother bear stood protectively over her sleeping cub in Sarah's arms. The young nurse, still weak but determined, held the tiny creature close to her chest, feeling his small heart beating steadily against her own. "They're not taking him," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone. after what he did for me, after what they've all done for the children here, I won't let anyone hurt them." Tommy and Luna moved to stand beside Sarah, their small hands reaching out to touch the sleeping cub. The golden healing light, which had been flickering weakly, suddenly flared brighter at their touch. "We're connected now," Luna said with wonder. "All of us, the bears, the children, everyone who sang together. We're like a family." Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring Sarah's vital signs, looked up with amazement. "The healing energy isn't fading. If anything, it's getting stronger. The bond you've all formed is somehow sustaining it." Through the windows, they could see that the situation outside was becoming tense. Military personnel were setting up a perimeter around the hospital, while the community of bears remained calm but alert at the forest's edge. The crowd of people who had been singing were now forming a protective circle around the hospital, unwilling to let the military interrupt what they had witnessed. Betty Morrison's voice came over the PA system one final time, but now it carried a weight of authority that made everyone listen. "To the military commanders who have just arrived," she said clearly, "you are about to make a decision that will determine whether humanity takes a step forward into a new age of healing or retreats back into fear and isolation. These bears have shown us something that medical science has been searching for centuries to understand. They have given us the gift of cooperative healing, and they have asked for nothing in return except our trust." The mother bear lifted her massive head and looked directly at Mara, as if asking her to carry an important message. Mara felt a strange warmth flow through her mind, and suddenly she understood what the bear wanted her to do. "I need to get outside," Mara said urgently. "She wants me to speak to the military commander. She's showing me something about other places where this is happening." Tommy's eyes widened. "Other hospitals? Other bears?" Mara nodded, the visions from the mother bear becoming clearer. "It's not just here. This is happening in hospitals and healing centers all around the world. Bears, wolves, dolphins, even birds. They're all beginning to work with humans to heal the sick. We're witnessing the beginning of something much bigger than just one hospital." Sarah, still holding the sleeping cub, looked around at the faces surrounding her, human and bear alike. "Then we have to make sure it doesn't end here, whatever the cost." The mother bear approached Sarah one more time, gently nuzzling the young nurse's face. Then she did something that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She carefully took her cub from Sarah's arms and placed him back in Luna's embrace. But this time the gesture felt different. It felt like a gift, a bridge between two species that would remain connected forever. "She's trusting us with him," Luna whispered, "not just for now, but for always." The bear cub opened his sleepy eyes and looked up at Luna, then at Tommy, then at Sarah and all the other humans who had helped save them both. He made a soft, contented sound and settled back into Luna's arms as if he had found his true home. As Mara prepared to go outside and face whatever awaited them with the military, the mother bear did something unexpected. She moved to the center of the room and began to sing one final time, but this song was different from all the others. It was a song of hope, of new beginnings, of a world where healing knew no boundaries between species. One by one, every person in the room joined their voice to hers. Tommy and Luna sang with the confidence of children who had touched magic. Sarah sang with the gratitude of someone given a second chance at life. Dr. Vasquez sang with the wonder of a scientist discovering something beyond the realm of current understanding. Betty Morrison's voice drifted in from the PA system, strong and clear despite her age. As their voices blended together, the golden healing light expanded beyond the confines of the small room. It flowed through the corridors of the hospital, touching every patient, every family member, every staff member who had witnessed the miracle. It spread outside to the crowd of people who had chosen to stand with the bears rather than flee in fear. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The military helicopters overhead began to descend, not in an aggressive formation, but slowly, carefully, as if their pilots were being drawn by the same healing energy that connected everyone below. When the first military commander stepped out of his helicopter, his face was not hard with authority, but soft with wonder. He walked directly to where the crowd was singing, and without a word, he added his own voice to the chorus. The standoff that everyone had feared never came. Instead, as the sun rose fully over Cedar Grove Hospital, a new dawn was breaking for the relationship between humans and the natural world. Months later, the Cedar Grove Healing Center had become the first officially recognized interspecies medical facility in the world. Luna and Tommy, now completely healthy, spent their days helping other sick children learn to communicate with the animal healers who had come from all corners of the earth to join the program. Sarah Chen had become the head of the Pediatric Animal-Assisted Healing Department, working alongside creatures that medical science was only beginning to understand. The bear cub, now grown but still gentle, had become her constant companion and co-worker, helping to comfort frightened children and amplifying the healing energy that flowed through the center. Dr. Vasquez led a research team that was documenting and studying the healing phenomenon, working to understand how the cooperation between humans and animals could be replicated in medical centers around the world. Betty Morrison, her health fully restored by her connection to the healing network, had become an ambassador for the new age of cooperative medicine, traveling the world to help establish similar programs wherever they were needed. And Mara, the nurse who had first followed the sound of a bear's lullaby through the hospital corridors, now served as the director of the global network of healing centers that had sprouted up in every corner of the world. But perhaps the most beautiful part of the story was what happened every evening at sunset. Throughout the world, in hospitals and healing centers, in homes where sick children were recovering, and in forests where animals gathered to share their ancient wisdom, voices would rise together in the same song that had started it all, the song of the mother bear, who had paced a hospital corridor one night and changed the world forever. The song that had taught humanity that healing was not just about medicine and machines, but about love, connection, and the courage to trust in something greater than ourselves. The song that proved that when different species join their voices together, they can create miracles that no one could achieve alone. And in the forest outside Cedar Grove, where the mother bear had returned to live among her community, the singing continued every night, carried on the wind to reach every corner of the earth where healing was needed. Because the greatest healing of all had been the healing of the barriers between species, and the discovery that love truly knows no boundaries when it comes to caring for those who need help. The song would never end, because there would always be someone, somewhere, who needed to hear it. And there would always be voices, both human and animal, ready to sing it for them.